How's everybody doing so far? Awesome. Okay. Welcome to this presentation called Building Contextual Personas through Scenario Planning. My name is Jem Rosario. I am a user experience specialist with Analytical Engine Interactive, and I'm coming to you all the way from the land of Putin and Justin Trudeau. So the slides are over here. This directly loads to my SlideShare account, so you can definitely follow along with that. And there's my Twitter handle, so I would definitely be very happy to connect with you via LinkedIn or Twitter. And let's definitely keep the hashtag game going, because it would be just great to know and make a big splash with the design community over here. Because the last time I checked, WordCamp Boston is also happening in there, and there were some very nice WordCamp and design for Drupal back and forth going on. So I work with Analytical Engine Interactive. We are a user experience and content strategy consultancy, and we work with mostly not-for-profit organizations and public orgs to deliver digital products that users love. So the presentation that I'm going to be presenting to you really builds upon what we've learned yesterday in the keynote address and what Danny has presented yesterday. And hopefully these will add more to your user research and strategy arsenal moving forward. And without further ado, let's jump right in. Personas are great. They're a highly revered and integral part of the user experience design process. They're born out of a long and intensive user research process, which involves talking to people about their needs, their goals, their concerns, their occupation, behaviors, and etc., in order to come up with a composite picture of someone who may use product X. So for example, if you have some 10 to 20 users in here, you'll be talking to them, you're going to try to dig a little bit deeper on what their real needs are, etc. And then you synthesize those findings in order to come up with a picture like Ellen. She's 45 years old, she's a mother of 2, she's a proud tech adopter, and then she pays for her coffee exclusively from her mobile device. No cash, no plastic, just simply show the phone and there, boom, she has her latte already. But something happened along the way. By 2002, at least according to Jamie Levy, okay, personas started resembling this strange list of stereotypical characteristics based on nothing more than marketing data. For some reason, the story that is supposed to tell you a lot about your users is taken out of the equation and then replaced with what I call form details such as name, age, job, income, maybe a little few points here and there about needs and goals. But other than that, that's it. Okay? What happens then is that personas generate more questions than answers. Instead of building more empathy and buy-in for user research, that is, they yield more questions and doubts about the veracity of the persona, and instead of consensus, you start having more skepticism about the process and other more concerns and other more objections with doing user research. And what ultimately happens then is that personas start feeling like superficial research artifacts whose truthfulness is somewhat a little bit easy to doubt, especially if you have research that's done really not up to par, not up to standards. So they become one big, okay? It just becomes that. It becomes an expression of indifference. There's more question marks rather than exclamation points or light bulb moments. But I do think it is solvable, okay? You just have to do actual first-hand user research and then show when you present your findings that you've really done some serious listening through the usage stories that you can generate, that you can make. But I also think that there's a bigger problem. Traditional personas are so good on the behavioral side of the user, the needs and goals, and it's really critical data, no doubt. But for some reason, it misses, it somehow misses to map relevantly with the business goals of the product. Okay? This articulation of the business goals and how all of the insights that you've had and how they're going to be beneficial to the business, the what's in it for me factor, they're not necessarily, or they're not always explicitly called out, at least for some user research practices. I mean, sure, Millie, okay, will be using the product because it's needed to do her job. It has to be in desktop because mobile is just too small. But beyond that, personas seem to struggle to make the leap from behaviors to business goals. So my question then is, how are we going to be solving this? If our goal is to really entrench and really make user research and product strategy a very vital component of the discovery process and the product development process, how are we going to make sure that the insights and the research that we're going to be doing can map relevantly to business goals? My recommendation is this experimental user research technique called Contextual Personas, where we combine the behavioral strengths of traditional personas and the product context, which I describe as the business conditions that give rise to your product. So not only do you analyze the base details of your user or your customer segment, but also the critical and the uncertain factors that drive the need for your product. This will be crucial in identifying problem-solution fit, which, as we'll see later, is the key to a winning product strategy. So far, so good? So let's jump right in. So I've been mentioning this thing about context in contextual personas. So you probably are wondering right now, so what does understanding context have to do with delivering digital products that users love? Here's how. So when we talk about context, what we're really referring to are the conditions that give rise to your product or to your product idea. It is composed of three aspects, which, when we analyze them, give you a fuller view of how individuals in that context work through their biggest challenges. So the first step in trying to understand context is to really look at the problem space, which involves really understanding everything that's going on in that setting. What's going on in here? Okay, what's going on in here? Is there an issue popping up in here some way? Some way, somehow, somewhere? What are the issues that are really, what are the issues that matter? What are the problems that this particular segment of the population, for lack of a better term, how are they really going about their lives, and what are their deepest concerns? So that's your problem space. So that's step number one. Step number two is now to look at what are the alternatives and the solutions that have been in place in that particular customer segment. It's now the competitive landscape. So how are people solving this specific problem? Is there a solution in place? Is there no solution in place? Or if there is a solution, is it good? Is it not good? Can there be something more to what is out there on offer? So that's your competitive landscape. And by doing those two previous steps, you come up with the problem-solution fit, in which you're now trying to understand, now the solution that's in place, is it doing it? Is it really solving the problem that your customers, that your users have? And ultimately, what you want to do in the product development process is to identify the problem-solution fit, and hopefully that solution is your solution. Okay? That's what you ultimately want to achieve in the long run. Because really, the goal in probing context is to understand what Clayton Christensen calls the job to be done. And by understanding the job to be done, we're really looking at two things: the pain point, which refers to the customer problem, and the solution, or what customers will hire to get the job done. So how Christensen articulates this in his book, The Innovator Solution, is that the way we experience life is that there's a certain need that we need addressed. And we want to do something, we want to achieve something. Like there's this burning thing that we just want solved, and we are looking at something or someone, for that matter, to really just fix this thing, to solve this thing. This is what he calls the thing that you will hire to get the job done. So how can we tease this job to be done? Okay, Clayton Christensen will tell you that it's all about contextual inquiry, more user interviews, etc., and that's really great. What I would add to that arsenal of techniques is this thing called scenario planning. So what is scenario planning, ladies and gentlemen? So scenario planning is a strategic foresight method that lets you take an educated peek at some futures your product or service might play out. It's all about making measured guesses about the future using present or emerging trends to glimpse what's next. So when we say scenario planning, it's not necessarily so much that you're saying, I see a man in your life or something. It's not outright prediction. Okay? You're not saying, you're not just throwing these outlandish scenarios in which, in 2020, like give me a very outrageous scenario that could happen in 2020. Okay? So in 2020, flying cars will happen, or I don't know, Ivanka Trump will go for the presidency or something. Okay, not necessarily outlandish scenarios, but you're using the present in order to say, okay, so these are the things that are happening right now, and of the things that are happening right now, it might build up into this particular plausible future. So scenario planning is not prediction in and by itself, but more like very, very measured and careful speculation, using the present as the data, okay? So at a very broad level, we're looking at 3 stages in the scenario planning process. So 3 stages. The first one is identifying trends, where we articulate the problem space, what are we trying to solve, what are the things that are going on in this context, and what are the big ticket things that really drive the changes in the activity in this particular context, in this problem space. So more on user research and really more customer development. And then once you identify those key drivers, you now start building those scenarios. And we're going to be spending more time on that second phase, the scenario development process, because this is where really the magic and the foretelling happens, so to speak. And then finally, we're going to be looking at how these scenarios that you have come up will really impact the strategy that you're going to be building moving forward. So that's scenario planning, the process, the 3-stage process in a nutshell. And I'm now going to be digging deeper into stage 2 of the process. So far, so good? Okay. So to make this entire process a little bit more relatable, a little bit more digestible, let's start with an example. Let's take scenario planning for a spin. So how many of you know this guy? Okay, so rumor has it that this guy was running up a hill when he was supposed to be riding a bike, and the last time I checked, he also started crashing in yesterday's stage. So let's say, for example, that the maillot jaune, the yellow jersey of Chris Froome of Team Sky, who's fighting it out in the Tour de France as we speak. So let's say he went to your office, okay, with all full armada of Team Sky, Brailsford, Geraint Thomas, and the rest. And I know that Richie Port is now with the other team, but he went with his best friend there, Chris. So let's say he went to your office and he said, "Oh, hi there. I'm thinking of really just trying to come up with a better way to, get around the city with my nice, not necessarily a road bike, but with my touring bike. So how do we identify the safest bike routes in the city way before we ride?" So let's say that was a problem that Chris Froome and Team Sky posed to you. They're looking to your expertise and they just want you to solve it. So typically, what happens during the product strategy process? This is usually the time when you're posed this question. This is when you start thinking, oh, okay, let's try building an app. Let's try building a website. Let's do more omnichannel marketing. Let's do more social media campaigns. Imaginations start running wild and all that, and that's great. But say you gravitated towards, say, for example, a crowdsourced platform that identifies, rates, and reviews the best and the safest bike routes in the city. So let's say that was the solution that you just said, okay, let's see if this thing is going to work. So what you want to do now is to dig deep more on the potential users, okay? So the first step in the scenario development process is this: find your critical uncertainties, okay? The first step is to find your critical uncertainties. And critical uncertainties are really defined as the two big ticket and uncertain factors surrounding your users, okay? Big ticket and uncertain. Show-stopping and things that you probably will never be able to really predict with utmost sureness. So, for example, in the critical factor, what we defined it in here is the most hard-hitting or crucial factor about your users that could affect your product or services creation. So, say for instance, one of the things that commonly impact the product development process is timelines, budget, legislation or maybe some really big changes happening in your society or landscape, etc. Think of it this way: a big ticket factor, a critical factor, they tend to be showstoppers, more or less, so to speak. And then the uncertain factor, these are the things that are just so difficult to call. Like, for example, in Toronto, we don't know how many centimeters of snow will typically fall on a given winter. So it's that uncertain. You just don't know how to say for sure what will really go on, how you're going to predict it. And the reason why we articulate those critical uncertainties is that we want to unearth the crucial facts about your users and the potential relationship that they may have with respect to the product or service that you're offering. Okay? Not only do you call out these critical and uncertain factors, but you want to see how are they going to be relating to me? What is that potential relationship that could emerge? And that would be key to really understanding how you're going to be positioning your product in the process. So, how are you going to be finding that? So, we do a lot of user research for that matter. So, we talk to people, we do more primary, secondary research, do contextual inquiries, analytics research, surveys, ethnography, and all the shebang, okay, for user research. And then once we've had all that data, what we're usually going to do is we're going to come back to our office, and then all of the papers from user interviews, etc. We're going to be laying them out on the table and say, okay, you have one sticky notepad, and then you're working with this interview. Note down every single salient point that you find. Like, for instance, this person does this, and then this, and then that. So every single salient fact about this particular user, about this particular interview, note them in a sticky note, and then just put it out there. Okay? So in the process, what you're going to find is that if you've had like 5 or 10 interviews, you're going to have a sea of sticky notes out there. There's just going to be a lot, because you're going to be articulating every single salient point out there. And once you've had that, you're going to be synthesizing those raw data to identify the trends, to identify really what are those recurring themes that you're noticing. So once you had that 50 or so collage of sticky notes, you're going to be grouping them into categories, into themes, and you're going to be putting a heading on them. And in the process, you're going to be constantly asking yourself, why? Why is this a factor? Why is this important? Why is this happening? And you want to do that not because you're trying to be obnoxious, but you're trying to get down to the root cause of the process. Okay, you want to do that root cause analysis, like why is this really the case? That's what you want. It's called the 5 whys for root cause analysis. So remember, guys, get those details in as early as possible. You don't want to be that guy or girl that just flies off the seat of their pants and goes nowhere. I mean, getting on a taxi and saying, drive, okay? May have worked in the movies, okay? I mean, but, you know, in product development, this is just like running a huge risk. I mean, no, just no. It's a lot riskier than walking along train tracks playing Pokemon Go, okay? It happened in Toronto already. Good thing it didn't end badly, but the transit officials were not happy, and the police. But that's none of my business, okay? So don't be that guy or girl. Let's get those research in, and then let's keep on studying and studying and studying. So once you've done your user research, it's now time to identify the critical and the uncertain. So let's say you've done that sticky note, affinity mapping, and 5 whys kind of thing. And you've said, okay, of these things, these are the 2 things that really, really matter. So let's say that you've settled on a critical and uncertain factor. Your critical factor is your planning tendency. I don't know a lot about this city. I really need to know every single thing that I need to know so that I won't get lost. So something like that, planning tendency. And then your uncertain factor is your confidence on the road. Okay, so how are you going to be reacting if you're seeing a speeding car on the road? Are you going to be racing after them, or are you just going to say, oh, no, I'm not even going to do it? So, something like that. Road confidence for uncertain factor and planning tendency for critical factor. So let's say that you've settled on that. What you want to do then is to plot them along an X and a Y axis. So let's say your Y axis is your critical factor, your planning tendency. So on a spectrum, you have the extreme planner and the non-planner over there. So that's your Y-axis for your critical factor, and your X-axis, your uncertain factor. The nervous rider and then the confident rider. When you cross that, when you cross those 2, there will be some scenarios or stories that will emerge. And what you will find is that these stories, these usage scenarios, they are really reminiscent of a particular type of person, a particular type of user. Okay? Talk this through with your team. When you do these crossings, constantly ask yourself, so the scenario that's emerging right now is that you have an extreme planner who just really, really wants to know everything that there is to know. And then you also have someone who probably is a bit of a nervous rider in the city. So this person is proactive. And I tend to identify with that because being from Toronto, I just said, I need to get a map of Boston or else I won't be able to make it in here or something. So I tend to be this person, this proactive guy, even though I said, I want to make sure that I'm not going to be using up my data plan and pay too much when I come back in there. So proactive. So why is this a thing? You want to constantly ask them. You want to constantly ask your team throughout this process when you do this crossing. The immediate result, ladies and gentlemen, is as we've mentioned, is a user type and a backstory. So this is really the context that I am referring to in contextual personas. Now notice, ladies and gentlemen, that we're not necessarily talking about behavioral aspects in here. We're not necessarily talking about like, this is how she goes about her day or something. We're not necessarily talking about behavioral aspects in here, but we're articulating the potential, the possible, the plausible relationship that can emerge as a result of working with your product or your service. So use this contextual insight to power up behavior-driven personas so that you could achieve a fuller picture of how your users might relate with your product and how this relationship can drive design decisions and design strategy. So far, so good? So your process, in a nutshell, is you identify the trends, and then you do the scenario development process, the crossing of the critical and the uncertain, and then once you have that, and once you're convinced that, okay, so this is now really the scene that's emerging, let's now take that to our clients and stakeholders and map that out to strategy. So here are some common questions, concerns, and objections that could emerge as a result of using this model. So one of the common questions that I get whenever I present this method is this. Okay, Jem, that's nice, but really, aren't behavioral personas really sort of enough? I mean, why do I have to go through this entire critical, uncertain scenario, planning, thinking, mumbo, jumbo? Why do I have to do this? Like, it makes things a little bit more complicated. Are traditional personas enough? Okay, tell me, aren't they enough? Well, here's my answer to that. It's not really so much that traditional personas aren't enough. They're actually very, very good, okay? But the only concern that I have been noticing, especially with the way some user research is being done, is that in some cases, they don't really map very, very well to the business needs of your clients or your stakeholders. They don't always tell you why these behaviors matter to the organization. And I've seen this issue time and time again. I was recently in a big data conference in Toronto, and two of the presentations that I've seen in there have articulated really that, you know what, guys, this thing called predictive analytics, they're so great at telling you what your users might do programmatically, but that's predictive, and it's just simply, that composite model. But what really your bosses and your stakeholders want to know is, so we know this thing, but what we should do? What should we do rather? It's that jump from predictive to prescriptive, from research to action that our clients and stakeholders are looking to us for. That kind of expertise, because in a sense, we researchers are the ones that know what is happening on the ground. What should we do with this finding? That's exactly the question. And as researchers and strategists, we need to do a better job of really articulating that if we want to entrench the research and strategy portion into our businesses. Okay? So it's not so much that traditional personas and behavioral personas are bad, but we want to make sure that they really map relevantly to the business needs, which is really key to achieving this buy-in thing that we're looking for. Because when you think about it, product development in today's day and age is a very, very, very high stakes game. Not only do you have to fight it out in terms of problem solution fit, not only do you have to really look at the pain points in the job to be done, but you also have to make sure that you're achieving all of the strategic goals and targets that you have. You want to make sure that the thing that you're offering is not just something that users want, but also at the same time, something that your client will say, okay, this thing in this particular product, in this line of business, this is really performing well, this is achieving our targets. We want to keep that. That is the best case scenario, but how are we going to be supposed to do that then? Okay? How are you going to build something that is not just wanted, but also more or less cheaper in the process? Value innovation, so to speak. If our goal is to build digital products and services that our users and stakeholders will love, then we've got to make sure that problem solution fit and business strategy can sing in unison. How do we get them in concert, so to speak? And to do that, this requires a little bit more thoughtful thinking into your strategic planning process. Okay? And here's what I've noticed also. So I've mentioned that I've presented a former iteration of this presentation in Toronto, and one of the things that I really remember during that presentation was someone asking me, you know what, Jem? Yeah, nice process, but how does this help me? How does this help me? And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? And I was sweating buckets and all that, like right there in the middle of everything, how does this help me? And I used to think that, am I doing a bad job in communicating the idea? Is the process not clear or something? But I soon realized, moments after I let that freak out face dissipate, I soon realized that the issue was actually a bigger one. And it goes like, it's not always clear how research blends well with corporate or organizational strategy. There seems to be this big chasm between the insights that we generate and the actual goals. Hence that big pit over here. Okay? So we can be such powerhouses of data, no doubt, and insight, but how do we use that data, that information, to really drive business objectives? Okay? If strategic planning is all about taking your company or business from the status quo to a hopefully better state, then we will have to pin research to strategy. How do we cross the chasm, as Geoffrey Moore says, from insights and models to roadmaps and conscious steps to achieve that better state? So to close this presentation, I just want to share with you some 4 lessons that I have learned in connecting research to strategy. Now, for a little bit of context, I work in a client services capacity, so I build research artifacts, and I do more wireframes and user experience research for clients and organizations. And this may or may not be well, I don't want to say it's not applicable, but this may differ if you're in an enterprise setting, but maybe not so much. I don't know. Let's see how this is going to go. So I hope these 4 lessons will be of use to you, and I definitely want to learn how you're going about these things, because it's an ongoing question for me. How do we realistically build research and bring them to strategy moving forward? So let's start with the first one. Always do a reality check about your product and mission whenever you can. Always ask yourself, what's the problem that we're trying to solve, and what is the job to be done? And ask that every time you're carried away. So remember that fictional scenario that we've had. Chris Froome, with all the fanfare from Team Sky, comes to your office and asks you the $1 million question. How do we make sure that we know everything there is to know about the city way before we ride? And it's very, very easy to get so carried away, and we get very intoxicated with the entire ideation process because it feels so new, it feels so fresh, it feels very, very promising, and all these ideas are darting here, there, and everywhere, and we tend to get carried away, okay? And that's not a bad thing. What you want to happen, though, is to make sure that those ideas are things that can really be acted upon, okay? And whenever I do ideation and my team is just going like, yes, let's do this, this, and that, I say, hold on, excitement is very great, I love it, I totally do, but let's just narrow down your thinking, okay? Because what we want to happen is to deliver more concrete ways to realize customer/business value, rather than go really dreamy and so big sky about things. Nothing wrong with big thinking, don't get me wrong, but make sure that the big thinking is really actionable with what we can do, with what our capacities as product builders, what we can deliver. Okay? This ensures that you can table actionable ideas and feasible tactics. So that's lesson number 1. What's the problem we're trying to solve, and what is the job to be done? If all else fails, fall back on that question. Let's do number 2. Alignment is extremely important between you and the people that you're building your products for. And this involves keeping an open and reliable line of communication between you and your clients or stakeholders. This really ensures that we are on track, that we are on the same page, and most importantly, no surprises. So one of my favorite situations in my second life, which is being an indoor cycling instructor or spin instructor, is if you've ever had an instructor who will always tell you, go guys, give it more, give it your best shot, let's go. And then she told you before that, let's go for a 30-second push, go, hit it. And then at the 29 seconds, you say, go team, 30 more seconds. So she extends that work phase, and you get surprised, and you say, I've already been working hard for 30 seconds. I was already at my breathless push there. Why are you asking me for 30 more seconds of my effort? I've got nothing more in here, woman or man. Okay? Surprise. And our good friend Danny in here has a lot of stories about surprises and the CEO button, the hippo in the room. I'm not going to rehash that because, okay? So alignment is important because we just want to make sure that if there's anything on the horizon that could happen, and we're going to say, okay, so this might happen, so how are we going to be planning for this? That constant alignment is what we want to achieve consensus and understanding with our clients and stakeholders. So that's number 2. Number 3. Communicate with everyone, because clarity goes a very, very long way. I've had this situation in one of our projects in which we've done a kickoff meeting with the board of trustees of a very esteemed community newspaper over there in Canada, and then the board of trustees and the editorial board were there, and the board of trustees were the ones that were posing the toughest questions for us. Because understandably, because it was really their business, it was their corporate identity on the line, so, and being the board of trustees are going to be pushing for, why do you have to do this? Why does this have to be this stuff and things like that? Why? And what we found is that those kinds of questions, hard as they are, and potential objections to the strategy that we're going to be tabling, we find that sometimes the biggest barrier to alignment and buy-in is not so much because someone has a personal agenda, although sometimes personal agendas are in place, but sometimes, in some cases, people just don't know what is happening, okay? So it's not so much that people just want to say, no. It's not so much that. It's like, I don't really see what's happening in here, so could you just clarify it a little bit? And we found that the moment you start building that relationship, understanding what's going on with their own lines of business, with their own departments, what their own challenges are, and saying, this is how we can help you propel that objective for your department moving forward, we found that soon those crinkles and objections start unraveling, and no, not really unraveling, they start easing out. And we say, oh, now I see. Okay, I see. So this is okay. This is a good idea. Let's push on. Let's keep going. So those objections, see how you can talk it out with your clients and stakeholders, because you want to make sure that people are on the same page and they want to make sure that they have an idea of what on earth is going on. So that's number 3. And finally, number 4, track success and constantly revisit your strategy. Full disclosure, ladies and gentlemen, as someone in the client services capacity, one of the struggles that I find is that, constantly saying, did we achieve what we want to achieve in here? That's usually a challenge, because especially in the agency model, once you've launched the product, that's pretty much the end of the story. Usually, okay? What I'm starting to recommend to my senior partner is this. Can we come back to our client and just ask what's going on? Like, how has this product or service really grown under your watch? Did the bounce rate work itself out? Did it go down? Did it go up? Was there more engagement? So so it's in line with that, building a constant relationship with your clients and coming back to them and just trying to check in. Are we on track? Are we achieving what we want to achieve? And in some cases, or at least the way I sell it to my senior partner is that you don't really need to make this like a big kickoff meeting or something, but you just contact our primary client and just say, what happened? Are we doing how we're supposed to do? And the good news with that client of ours, that big community newspaper, is that when we built the product and we've built their CMS, so to speak, and we have shipped it, they now have a new hiring model. They now have better processes in place to make sure that the editorial flow is really spot on, etc. So that to us is a success factor, and we celebrate it, whether it's big or small. And in the event that we're not really hitting our targets, no need to freak out. Just pause, come together, discuss a little bit, and say, okay, what's happening in here? What could we do? What could we fix? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to rethink what we're doing? Okay, so come together and just figure out solutions. No need to finger point yet, but you just have to say, okay, what's going on in here, and is it actionable? Because really, launch is just day one. Launch is just day one. The futures of the product depend on how it's going to be performing in day 2, month 1, year 7, etc., stuff and things like that. So to end this presentation, I've presented to you Contextual Personas, which is a combination of behavioral insights and then product contexts. It glimpses potential usage scenarios given user goals, motivations, and product or business context. It also is driven by user research, deep user research, I would say, and this time with a view towards the critical and the uncertain. And it covers much more ground critical to achieving problem-solution fit, and hopefully a few months down the line, product-market fit. Okay, and this funnels nicely into agile user stories, user story mapping, customer journey maps, etc. for those who are wearing a more research and strategy hat. So team, remember, successful product creation is a masterful dance between the business and us designers and developers, where the goal is to deliver digital products that users love. Okay? When in doubt, come back to the customer, to the user. They are at the heart of your business. They're the reason for everything that we do, and we live to make things better for them. Okay? Look at the job that they want to have done and hack at it. Hit it where it hurts, as what some people would say. We're here not just to sell products, but outcomes that make lives a little bit better. Think of these as you report back to headquarters next week. And when you're stuck, always remember that you have an amazing Drupal community that has your back. Sounds good? And with that, go cracking and go catch them all. Thank you very much.